The first time I realized Amsterdam would break people was on this tiny bridge over Prinsengracht at sunset, water glowing orange, bikes hissing past like angry dragonflies. I was leaning on the rail when this overconfident dad in a bright world traveler hoodie announced to his family, "So this canal connects to the one in Venice, right?" and pointed like he'd discovered gravity. His teenage daughter froze mid-selfie. His son did the slow blink of generational disappointment, and a Dutch guy next to me nearly choked on his herring. When the dad doubled down with, "No, seriously, it's all the same water, that's how Europe works," the silence got heavy enough to sink a boat. I just stared at him and thought, bro, the only thing connecting Venice and Amsterdam right now is your confidence issues. Down by Central Station, there's this perfect chaos of bike lanes, tram tracks, cars, and clueless souls who value their ankles. I watched a loud Texas guy in cowboy boots drag a suitcase straight into the red bike lane because it's red. Must be the VIP sidewalk. Bells exploded around him like a metal orchestra as 50 commuters tried not to commit accidental homicide. One woman swerved so hard she almost kissed a tram. Another guy did this Olympic-level skid just to avoid his oversized suitcase. He threw his hands up and yelled, if it was dangerous, they'd put up a sign in American. Every bike bell ringing at him in chorus was the universe saying, bro, that was the sign. In a cramped Jordan Brown cafe that smelled like coffee, history, and a little bit of regret, I ended up next to a college bro in a faded frat shirt, absolutely convinced he was doing culture. Candle on the table, Dutch grandpas arguing softly in the corner, bartender polishing glasses like a movie extra. The bro raised his Heineken and said, "So when did Amsterdam get independence from Swiss?" And actually looked proud of the guess. His friend stared like the Wi-Fi had just gone out in his brain. The bartender paused mid-polish, eyebrows climbing into a new dimension, then calmly corrected him with a one-sentence history lesson. Somewhere in that moment, you could hear every social studies teacher he'd ever had quietly resign. At the Dam Square tram stop, seagulls screaming overhead like unpaid voice actors, a wellness Karen in designer athleisure was deep in combat with basic etiquette. People were lining up for the tram in this polite, loose formation, nobody pushing, nobody yelling, just vibes. She stormed right past everyone, dragging a rolling suitcase announcing, "Sorry, in my country we don't do standing around, we do efficiency." A little Dutch grandma gently tapped her arm and said in perfect English, "We do patience here, dear." Karen tried to laugh it off, but the whole platform gave her that soft, "we saw you" stare. The wild thing was, the tram showed up exactly on time, and she still lost. Over at a canal-side cafe in De Pijp, autumn wind cutting through jackets, and the smell of espresso hanging in the air, an Instagram travel girl set up a full photo shoot with a cappuccino she absolutely did not intend to drink. She squinted dramatically at the menu and asked the waiter, "Do you have like oat-free oat milk?" As if she'd just discovered a new food group. He blinked once, processed the physics violation, and politely offered regular milk or oat milk, like some kind of reasonable human. She sighed, typed angrily into her phone, and whispered, "Ugh, Europe is so behind on wellness," while chain-drinking sugar packets. Somewhere a Dutch cow mooed in disbelief. At a cozy pancake house near a narrow canal, syrup warming in tiny pitchers and kids pressing their noses to the window, I watched a retired rich couple approach the menu like it was a stock portfolio. The server lovingly explained poffertjes, stroop, powdered sugar, the whole deal, and the husband nodded before asking, "So which pancake is gluten-free, keto-friendly, and do you have a cauliflower option?" The room went silent long enough for a kid to drop a fork in surround sound. The server, trying not to laugh, gently replied, We have pancakes." The wife leaned in and whispered, "Just order the normal one, Charles. It's Europe. Our doctor can't see us from here." In Vondel Park, where the grass smells damp and the wind whips leaves across bike paths like nature's confetti, a business consultant in a crisp blue blazer was consulting a flock of ducks. He watched a local woman toss crumbs with this soft smile, then stepped in with his LinkedIn energy. Have you ever considered organizing their feeding schedule into shifts? Could really optimize the ecosystem. She tilted her head, looked at the ducks, then at this man trying to Six Sigma a pond. "They fly here for free," she said. "I think their benefits are good." When he tried to explain scalability to a bird, one duck turned around and pooped on his fancy loafer, like nature's annual performance review. Outside a quiet canal house near the Anne Frank house line, candles glowing in windows, water almost perfectly still, I heard a story from a local guide that still makes my soul exhale. A patriot uncle had turned up to a solemn walking tour, loud flag print windbreaker and all, talking over the guide with fun facts from some half-remembered documentary. When they reached a memorial plaque, everyone fell silent except him. He started posing for selfies, flashing thumbs up like it was a theme park. The guide gently asked him to lower his voice, explaining the weight of the place, the families, the history. He blinked, finally read the plaque properly, and slowly put his phone down like it suddenly weighed 50 pounds. Sometimes the hardest punchline is the silence people finally respect. On a canal cruise boat drifting past gabled houses and low bridges, lights flickering in the cabin, I met a cruise tourist who thought movies were documentaries. The guide pointed out old warehouses turned lofts, talking about trade routes and ship history, when the guy leaned over to his wife and whispered way too loudly, "So when do we see the part from that heist movie? The car chase on the rooftops?" He kept scanning the skyline like Vin Diesel might drop from a bell tower. The captain actually laughed and said, "If anyone drives a car on these roofs, I quit today." The tourist looked genuinely betrayed, like Amsterdam had failed to honor his Netflix subscription. In a crowded cafe near the flower market, tulips exploding in every direction, and tourists juggling paper cones of fries, a backpack bro was trying to tip in vibes instead of money. The bill came. He tapped the little card machine, then frowned when he didn't see a big tipping screen like back home. "Bro, where's the 20% guilt button?" he asked the barista, half joking, half dead serious. She smiled and said, "Service is included here. If you liked it, you can leave some coins." He nodded slowly, then dramatically dropped one lonely euro into the jar like he was solving capitalism. The espresso machine hissed louder than his generosity. On the ferry to Amsterdam Noord, cold wind slapping faces awake and cyclists balancing like it's nothing, I overheard a movie fanatic explaining Amsterdam logic to his confused girlfriend. The skyline opened up, cranes and towers poking the low gray sky, and he gestured grandly. "Babe, the whole city was clearly designed around the fault in our stars," he said. "Like they probably built half these canals just for that one movie scene." She stared at him, speechless, as a local teen next to them nearly dropped his bike laughing. Later, when the announcement said the ferry ride was free, he whispered, "Wow, they really do everything for the plot here." At the Bloemenmarkt, where tulip bulbs are stacked like candy and everything smells faintly of wet wood and tourist perfume, a honeymoon couple in matching rain jackets debated the most chaotic purchase. The groom pointed at a packet of bulbs and said, "Do these bloom in time for Instagram?" The vendor patiently explained seasons, soil, and that plants were not content strategies. His bride held up a wooden tulip and asked, "Okay, which one will make our future children more creative?" The vendor blinked, shrugged, and said, "Whichever one you actually remember to water." She bought the wooden one. Under the huge Rijksmuseum arch, where cyclists shoot through like arrows, camera shutters popping nonstop, I heard a bargain hunter trying to negotiate with art. Standing in front of a Rembrandt, he whispered to his friend, "I just feel like they could fit like 3 more paintings in here if they cropped this one." When the guide mentioned how much the piece was worth, he snorted and said, "For that price, I'd at least want a frame with USB ports." The people around him leaned back like his words might trigger the alarm. Somewhere, an invisible curator added him to a secret list called "Do Not Let Near the Canals at Night." In a tiny canal-side cheese shop in the 9 streets, the air so thick with a Gouda smell you could bite it, a TikTok travel expert went live to her followers while the cheesemonger tried to offer samples. She swirled a cube of aged cheese in her fingers like it was wine and said, "This one tastes very Dutch." The cheesemonger, a patient man in an apron older than her account, explained the region, the aging process, the crystals, the whole story. She nodded, then turned back to her phone. "Okay, guys, Amsterdam cheese is basically European cheddar, but with vibes." You could feel every cheese wheel in the room ripen from disappointment. At a quiet neighborhood canal in De Barges, boats tied lazily to posts and a single swan gliding like it owned the deed, a complainer. Dad stared at the cloudy sky and started one of those speeches that makes kids suddenly fascinated by their shoelaces. "Back home," he announced, "we'd monetize this whole view. Coffee drive-through, rooftop bar, maybe a water park?" His daughter looked at the swan, then at him, and muttered, "Maybe they just like it." A neighbor on their balcony took a slow sip of wine, watching this man try to franchise serenity. Sometimes the most powerful tourist review is a place refusing to care you showed up. On the Amsterdam lookout deck, city stretched out like a Lego set, swings creaking over the void. I watched a freedom guy squint at the skyline like he was hunting for a flag. "So where's the big government building?" he asked the staff, genuinely puzzled. "You know, the one where they control everything?" The staffer gestured vaguely. "It's more scattered." He shook his head, disappointed. "How do you know who to yell at?" He stood there, wind whipping his stars and stripes bandana, baffled by a country where power didn't come with one giant, obvious villain building to point at. His whole world view looked more unstable than the swing. In a sauna on the edge of the city, steam fogging the wood and people drifting between silence and soft conversation, I heard from a wellness influencer who had treated it like a personal branding event. She walked in, saw the mixed gender calm, and loudly announced, "So, where's the VIP women-only mindfulness zone with cucumber mists?" The regular smiled politely and shuffled over, giving her space she absolutely did not read as kindness. A staff member gently explained the shared etiquette, the quiet, the phones off rule. She lasted 7 minutes, then whispered, "This is too advanced for my nervous system," and fled to the lobby. Sometimes the most spiritual lesson is realizing you're not the main character in other people's relaxation. On a misty morning train rolling out of Amsterdam Centraal, fog smearing the windows like a soft filter, I overheard a first-time traveler who just discovered the concept of countries next to each other. "Wait," he said to his friend, "so we're in the Netherlands, but like, Belgium is just down there?" He pointed vaguely south like it was a rumor. An older Dutch man across the aisle smiled and traced a little map in the condensation, explaining distances, borders, and how trains work. The kid stared like he just realized Earth has a backside. Somewhere, his high school geography teacher woke up in a cold sweat for no reason. At a canal house hostel kitchen in De Pipe at 1 a.m., pots clanging, someone burning instant noodles, I heard a minimalist adventurer explain Dutch canals with the confidence of a TED Talk and the accuracy of a broken compass. "The thing is," he told a circle of exhausted backpackers, They built the canals as emergency fire exits. You know, for boats. That's why every house has stairs. Nobody corrected him for a full minute. They just watched the theory get more tangled. Finally, a local girl doing her dishes casually dropped. They were for trade, water management, and showing off money. He nodded like that's exactly what he'd meant. His ego stayed afloat, even if his facts drowned. On the edge of a bright green field just outside the city, where wind turbines spin behind rows of tulips like the future photobombing the past, an overconfident dad posed his kids for the perfect European Christmas card. He squinted at the flowers and said, "So, these bloom year-round because they're plugged into the canal system, right?" The tour guide told him about seasons, planting, and the sheer amount of normal dirt involved. He listened, nodded slowly, then whispered to his wife, "We'll just say they're year-round in the caption. Nobody fact-checks postcards." Somewhere in that tulip field, a single bee reconsidered its career. At Zansa Shan's windmills turning lazily over water and tourists trying on clogs like temporary personality traits, a college bro on a day trip pointed to one of the mills and said, "So this is where they invented Wi-Fi, right?" His friends laughed until they realized he wasn't joking. The guide explained grain, sawmills, and how wind used to be the original power source. The bro frowned and said, "Man, the past really missed out on having notifications." A goat nearby stared at him for a long, judgmental second, then turned away like even livestock had reached their limit. Back on a narrow back alley in the old center, bricks slick with recent rain and neon reflecting in puddles like melted candy, a Florida man variant in a flamingo shirt tried to haggle with a tiny corner shop over bottled water. The clerk calmly explained the price, which was already printed, as the guy waved his hands. "Come on, man, I'll give you exposure on my travel vlog," he said, panning his phone dramatically. The clerk blinked once and replied, "That will not help me pay my rent." The man paused, then paid full price anyway, but still told the camera he'd won the negotiation. On a residential canal where ducks leave little wakes, and the only sound is cutlery faintly clinking through open windows, a freedom guy stood staring at a simple, "No loud music on boats after 10 p.m. sign. "So they can tell you how loud to be in your own boat?" he asked a local walking by. She shrugged and said, "We all share the water. We like sleeping." He looked back at the sign, then at the peaceful houses, processing a universe where freedom included quiet. For the first time all week, he didn't have a comeback. And somehow, that tiny silence was the most civilized thing Amsterdam did to him.